The invitation came through a group text, dinner at the house this Saturday, for Arlena. A name-tagged dinner in my honor, and yet every word in that message felt rehearsed. Not warm, not real. I read it twice, then again. The host, Corvin, my older brother. The location, our old family home. His home now. Something in me tightened. I hadn't stepped foot in that house since Dad passed. And suddenly, a dinner to celebrate. What? No one said why. Just, come home. I stared at my phone, thumb resting on the reply. My heart beat unevenly, like it was warning me. Don't go. But I went. Driving through the old road, pine trees flanking both sides, I touched the pendant Dad gave me before he passed. A small pine leaf in silver. Roots matter, he'd said. My hands trembled as I pulled up the driveway. The porch light was on. Fake warm, like the message. Ellery opened the door with that same old light in her eyes. You look good, Arlena. Marceline came next, pulling me into a quick hug. Finally, the prodigal sister returns. Her tone was playful, but my smile didn't reach my eyes. Then came Lorraine, Corvin's wife. She barely nodded. You found the place all right, she said flatly, like I was a stranger. Inside, the house smelled like lavender and bleach, cold, clean. The family photos were gone. No trace of Dad's deer heads on the wall, or his worn recliner. I caught my reflection in a new mirror by the entryway. It didn't belong. Neither did I. On the mantel was a photo of a luxury cabin, gleaming with pine logs and glass. The caption read, Corvin's investment victory. I paused. That cabin. That was ours. No, mine. I helped build it. Invested. Sacrificed. Yet here it was, labeled like a solo conquest. My stomach turned. Dinner began with small talk, the kind that scrapes your nerves. Lorraine talked about her Pilates class. Marceline laughed too loudly at nothing. Ellery avoided eye contact. Corvin lifted his wine glass. To new beginnings and letting go of the past. Forks clinked, and then he said it, just like that. I sold the cabin last month. 70,000. Great deal. The table burst into claps, as if he'd announced a baby. I sat frozen, my wine glass, untouched. My face didn't move, but inside I crumbled. My jaw tightened so hard I thought it would crack. And tonight's dinner? Corvin added, grinning. On the house. My treat. A thank you to family. Not one person looked at me. I had paid for half that cabin. Found the land, signed the loan, in silence, in service, all for the illusion of unity. And now? Gone. Erased. Lorraine raised her glass. Some people get too sentimental about wood and stone. It's just a building, after all. My hands trembled under the table. Not rage, yet. Just the sting of being applauded for disappearing. I opened my mouth, then closed it. If I said anything now, I'd be the emotional one, the difficult sister, the dramatic fool who couldn't move on. So I swallowed it, all of it. My fingers gripped the pine leaf pendant. It burned cold against my chest. I had been erased in plain sight, and everyone at that table helped hold the eraser. They didn't invite me to celebrate me. They invited me to put the final nail in what I'd built, then smile while they did it. I smiled, slightly, just enough to be left alone. Inside, I replayed it all. Finding the plot of land online, negotiating the price, running errands, hiding receipts, Dad warning me, don't give away what you can't afford to lose. But I thought I was giving to family. It wasn't a loss. It was love. Now. It was a receipt I'd never get reimbursed for. And in that quiet, I heard him again. Dad's voice, like it never left me. Silence can be kind, but silence can also be surrender. I wasn't surrendering tonight. Not anymore. Dessert arrived. Some kind of lemon tart Lorraine picked up from her favorite bakery. I didn't touch it. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Voicemail. Federal Bureau. I excused myself, the phone still in my hand, screen glowing like a warning light. Out on the porch, I played the message. The words Federal Bureau blurred through my tears. I pulled the phone to my ear, breath held, heart thudding like a slow drum. "Ms. Whitlock," the voice said. Calm, measured. "This is Special Agent Keller from the FBI. Please return this call regarding an ongoing investigation involving a real estate transaction." I didn't move. The porch light above me buzzed. The wind had died. I stood there, blinking at nothing, like the world had paused. Real estate transaction? I hit replay. Again. And again. The words didn't change, but something inside me did. I remembered that name. Keller. Sheridan, my former accountant, had mentioned him once, casually, months back. Some client of hers was being looked into for shell companies and tax misfilings. It didn't feel random now. I stared out toward the road, past the hedges, beyond the car. I could still hear laughter inside the house. Forks on porcelain, clinking glasses. Corvin's voice rising now and then like a song I didn't ask to hear. I walked back in quietly, said I had a work emergency, thanked Lorraine for dinner. She didn't look up, and got into my car. 10 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of a rundown gas station just off the highway. It was the kind of place that smelled of burnt coffee and tired souls. I sat in my car, screen glowing, fingers shaking. I opened my banking app. No sign of a deposit. No record of funds from any property sale, let alone one worth $70,000. And then, it hit me, like a sudden memory does. 3 months ago, I saw an envelope from a title company addressed to both me and Corvin sitting on the kitchen counter. He'd said, "Junk mail, already handled." I hadn't questioned it. Another memory. Sheridan once told me, offhand, that Corvin was getting creative with his property flips, using different LLCs, some that didn't even have proper state registrations. I brushed it off then. But now, it wasn't just erasure, it was theft. With ink, paper, and silence as weapons. My hand reached for the gear shift, but instead I punched in Sheridan's address and turned the car around. I didn't call ahead, just knocked. She opened the door in leggings and a hoodie, eyes wide. "Arlena?" "I need 5 minutes," I said. She stepped aside. I didn't waste time. "Do you remember Clearvine Holdings, LLC? Her face shifted. "Why?" "Because I think that's who bought the cabin. And I think that company doesn't really exist." She sighed, rubbing her forehead. "Corvin mentioned something about using a shell to make it clean on paper. I didn't know what he meant. I figured, not my business." "Would it be your business if someone was going to jail for it?" I asked. Her eyes dropped. She walked over to a drawer, rummaged, and pulled out a printed email. "He CC'd me by accident once. I kept it because it felt wrong." I scanned it. Subject line, "Clearvine Holdings, LLC. Final transfer docs." Corvin's name was there. Along with a second one, some out-of-state signature, I took a photo, said thank you, left. Back in the car, I held the wheel and just sat there, engine off, headlights out. The pendant hung cold against my skin. Dad used to call that cabin his future gift. Something we'd build now and pass on later. I'd sketched the layout on notebook paper, shopped the tile, painted the walls myself, and I let Corvin talk me into putting it under his name for taxes. "Family trust," he said. I was young, hopeful, and stupid. I stared through the windshield. Everything I worked for was now a footnote in someone else's spreadsheet. I didn't feel betrayed anymore. I felt furious. Not just at him, at me. For letting it happen. For not asking more questions. For thinking loyalty meant silence. "Silence is how they rewrite the story," I whispered to no one. I pulled my phone from my lap, found the number, pressed call. It rang twice. "Ms. Whitlock?" a voice answered. "Thank you for calling back." My mouth felt dry. "Yes, I got your message." "You're not in trouble," he said quickly, sensing my pause, "but we believe you may be a victim of a serious fraud." I swallowed. "Is Corvin involved?" A beat of silence. "He's one of them," Keller said. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun hadn't come up yet. The house was still. I left the car running, headlights piercing into the garage wall, like they were trying to warn me of something I already knew. I didn't go to bed. Instead, I went straight for the attic. The ladder creaked under my weight. Dust stung my throat. I reached for the box with the masking tape that read, "Dad, taxes plans." I hadn't opened it since the funeral. Inside was a cracked leather ledger, old, brittle, and full of his precise handwriting. I flipped through pages of budgets, loan notes, water bills, and then I found it, tucked behind an envelope. Cabin, future ownership. My name was right there, dated July 2012. His words, "For Arlena, full title, for her security if anything happens to me. Don't let Corvin convince otherwise." It hit like ice water to the face. I sat there in the attic, clutching that page, as something inside me cracked. That signature Corvin filed. That transfer document, it wasn't Dad's intention. It was his rewrite. My hands shook, but not from cold. From something older. Betrayal doesn't just hurt. It unthreads you. I stared at the note and suddenly remembered the last fight Dad and I had. Christmas 2014. I had questioned how Corvin handled the cabin fund. Money disappearing, things delayed. Dad brushed it off, said we needed peace in the family, said, "Not everything needs to be a war, baby girl." He meant well, but now I saw it for what it was. Fear, a fear of conflict that cost me protection. I had the truth in my hands back then and still chose silence. And then another flash. Christmas Day. Corvin grabbing that very ledger from the kitchen table and slamming it shut. "Drop it, Arlena. It's handled," he barked. He'd been laying bricks for this con for years, quietly, strategically. I closed the ledger and took a deep breath. No more sidelines. No more shrinking. By 9 a.m., I was at the local FBI substation. It smelled like printer toner and old carpet. I waited 15 minutes before Agent Keller appeared. Same voice from the phone, only now I could see the wear in his eyes. We sat in a small room with a dented filing cabinet and a clock that ticked louder than it should have. I slid the photo of the email across the table, then the ledger. He took his time reading. Didn't blink much. "This adds to an existing case," he finally said, eyes on the paper. "You've just become a key witness." The words didn't feel heroic. They felt heavy. He explained that Clearvine Holdings was part of a ring, a property fraud operation stretching across state lines, shell companies, fake title assignments, kickbacks. "We'll likely need your testimony," he said. "You okay with that?" I nodded. My voice barely made it out. "Yes." "You're not alone in this," he added, softer now. After the meeting, I needed to clear my head. I texted Ruth. She made coffee the way only older folks do, strong enough to make you pause before sipping. We sat on her porch while the neighborhood stirred awake. "I knew your dad," she said, handing me the cup. "And I always knew Corvin had a different kind of ambition." I told her everything. She didn't gasp, didn't ask me to forgive. She just listened. "Blood isn't always the same as loyalty, honey," she said. I held that sentence like a gift. She added, "You can love them and still not owe them your silence." It was the first time I didn't feel crazy. When I got home, there was a certified envelope at my door. I signed, opened it standing in the kitchen. It was a notice of pending sale. Clearvine Holdings was flipping the cabin. Closing in 5 days. I read it 3 times, each word a fresh cut. The document was clean, official. They weren't just stealing my past, they were trying to erase me from it. I slammed the paper on the table, grabbed my keys. The pendant around my neck swung forward like it agreed with me. "They're not stealing from me again," I whispered. The next morning, I drove into Denver with the envelope, the ledger, and a kind of nerve I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not fear, just resolve. The property attorney's office was in a converted old house with creaky floors and law degrees on every wall. I sat across from a man named Harris, gray hair, thin wire glasses, voice like sandpaper. He flipped through the documents, stopped, read again, then leaned back in his chair. "Missed Whitlock, The deed transfer has inconsistencies, especially for a co-inherited property, and this ledger, he tapped the page my father wrote, it directly contradicts the claim your brother filed to gain full rights. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. He continued, there's enough here for a motion to freeze the sale, but you'll need to act quickly. You'd need to file a legal injunction this week. I nodded. Then came the part I was afraid of. It'll cost about $4,800 up front. Filing fees, court costs, preliminary counsel hours. That number may as well have been 48,000. I sat there, feeling the room press in. I left the office holding the folder like it was a ticking clock. Back in my car, I stared at the dash and made a decision I didn't want to make. I scrolled through my contacts until I landed on Jason. I hadn't called him in over a year. The line rang 4 times. I almost hung up. Arlena? His voice still had that gravelly warmth, like old vinyl. Hey, I need a favor. A pause. That bad? Worse. We talked. I explained the injunction, the forgery, the timeline. Jason didn't say much, just listened. Then finally, you were always the one who gave without asking. Let me return the favor. I didn't cry. I just said, thank you, and hung up. That afternoon, I drove to the courthouse and handed over the payment. The clerk stamped the paperwork. The motion was filed. Just like that, I'd thrown the first legal punch. I stood outside the building for a minute, watching people come and go like nothing had changed, but something had. Later that evening, Ruth knocked on my door holding 2 grocery bags and a warning in her eyes. Men like your brother don't back off. They double down. We sat in the kitchen. She made tea. I told her everything, even about Jason. She listened, then leaned in. I once had a brother-in-law do something similar. I stayed quiet, told myself it wasn't worth the mess. I lost 20 years of savings. She let that hang in the air. Don't let him make you feel guilty for standing up. People treat you how you let them, and that includes family. Those words didn't land gently. They carved into something soft inside me, something I'd let too many people walk over. 2 nights later, there was a fundraiser at our church. I hadn't planned on going, but I went. Something inside me wanted to be seen, not just heard, seen. I walked in, head up. Within minutes, I spotted Corvin near the dessert table, laughing with Vivian like none of this was happening. Vivian saw me first. Her smile dropped. You had to bring this mess to church? She hissed under her breath as I passed. I'm not the one who brought the mess, I said quietly. Corvin stepped in, all practiced charm. Look, Lena, let's not turn this into more than it is. More than it is. I turned toward a small group nearby, folks we'd grown up with, friends of our parents, people who remembered when we all used to be one family. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I simply said, my father left that cabin to me. I have the proof. Corvin filed forged documents and sold it through a shell company. The air shifted. Someone whispered, wait, what? Vivian scoffed. You always were dramatic. No, I cut in, steady now. I was quiet. There's a difference. Corvin chuckled nervously. This is a misunderstanding. I'll clear it up. Then why did you bypass me on the deed? Why the LLC? He didn't answer. And in that silence, I felt something start to change. That night, just before midnight, an email landed in my inbox. Subject line, let it go. No sender name, just a burner address. The message read, drop this or the past comes back to haunt you. No signature, no details, but enough to make my breath catch. What past? I stared at the screen. Someone was nervous. Someone didn't want the truth getting out. And that meant one thing. I was getting close. I didn't sleep. The glow from the laptop screen burned into my eyes as I read the anonymous email again. Drop this, or the past comes back to haunt you. It had a stink of something rehearsed, like whoever wrote it had done this before. My mind raced through names, faces, memories. What past? My brother's or mine? I thought about the years of silence we'd kept under our father's roof, about all the things handled quietly so the family name stayed clean. That weight pressed down harder than the threat itself. This wasn't fear anymore. It was bone-deep exhaustion. I slid out of bed, opened the drawer I'd been avoiding. The flash drive with Dad's will draft sat exactly where I'd left it. My thumb hovered over it for a long beat before I plugged it in. One audio file. His voice came through, gravelly and slow, like he'd been carrying a secret. "Arlena," he said, "if you're hearing this, I didn't get the paperwork changed. The cabin was always meant for you. Not because it's fair, but because you've been the only one truly there. I don't trust Corvin's business dealings. Protect yourself." My throat tightened. I had proof. I'd had it for months, but I never let myself believe it counted. Tears welled but didn't fall. Instead, I printed the transcript, backed up the file, and slid it into a folder. The old reflex to react had burned out. This was different. This was planning. By morning, I was at the county recorder's office with that folder under my arm. The clerk glanced at the Clearvine name and frowned. "You're not the first to raise flags about them," she muttered. I asked for every transfer tied to the cabin since 2019. She slid a stack of documents across the counter, still warm from the printer. Right there on the top sheet was the title transfer, dated 2 days after my father's funeral. I stared at it until the words blurred. Corvin hadn't just acted fast. He'd been waiting. I walked out, the papers clutched so tight they bent. Out in the parking lot, I got into the car and shut the door. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. Memory hit like a slap. Corvin at the funeral, speaking about family unity while my father's casket sat behind him. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. No tears came, just a raw, soundless scream in my chest. This wasn't grief anymore. It was mourning for a family that never existed the way I thought it did. My breath came back slow and steady. The shaking stopped. Rage cooled into something harder, sharper. My rock bottom had a floor, and I'd hit it. Now, I was standing. Later that afternoon, I drove to a small coffee shop. I needed a neutral space to think. I sat by the window, folder on the table, hands wrapped around a cup that had long gone cold. That prickling sense of being watched crept up the back of my neck. A man in his 40s sat in the corner, pretending to read his phone. When our eyes met, he hesitated, then stood and walked over. "Miss Whitlock?" he asked. "Yes," I said, keeping my voice even. He sat down across from me. "I used to work with your brother. I think we need to talk." I leaned back slightly, studying him. For the first time in weeks, the air around me didn't feel like it was closing in. It felt like it was opening. I met his gaze. "Tell me everything you know." Greg Porter looked older than his age, shoulders curved like he'd been carrying something heavy for a long time. We sat across from each other at a chipped formica table in a diner off Highway 82. The place smelled of burned coffee and bacon grease, the kind of smell that lingers on your clothes long after you've left. He kept his eyes low at first, hands wrapped around a mug as if it might steady him. Then he spoke, his voice low but firm. He told me how Clearvine kept 2 sets of books, one for the IRS and one for themselves. Properties like my father's cabin were reclassified as gifts to dodge taxes, then flipped through shell LLCs. He slid a crumpled printout across the table. Corvin's name sat at the top of an internal memo, dated 3 weeks before my father died. Early asset transfer suggestions. I felt my stomach tighten. I asked if I could record him. He nodded. His words were clear enough to cut steel. "This isn't a family dispute anymore," he said. "Push them, and they'll shove back harder." When I pulled into Ruth's driveway later that afternoon, the sky had gone slate gray. I didn't expect Corvin's truck to be there. He was inside, leaning on Ruth's kitchen counter like he owned the place. Ruth's hands twisted around a dish towel, her eyes flicking between us. He started first. "So you're still spinning your stories, huh?" I didn't flinch. I pulled the memo transcript from my bag and set it on the table. "Recognize your name?" I asked. Ruth's eyebrows rose. Corvin's jaw tightened. "Recording people without their consent? That's illegal, Arlena." His voice was sharper now. I stayed calm. "Greg gave me permission. This isn't defamation. This is truth." Ruth stepped in, voice steady. She's not stirring trouble. She's exposing it. Corvin's smirk faltered, just for a second. It was the first time I'd seen him off balance. The room felt like a fuse had just been lit. That night, after Corvin stormed out, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. My hands moved without hesitation. I sent Greg's memo and my father's audio file to the county sheriff's office, CCing my attorney. My phone buzzed. My attorney's reply: "We'll file the formal complaint in the morning. Start preparing yourself for court." I stared at the email draft I'd already begun to a journalist I knew from years back, someone who'd covered real estate scams in the Rockies. Subject line: "Inheritance theft. I have proof." For the first time, my heart didn't race. It beat steady, cautious but emboldened. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was moving first. The next day, I drove out to the cabin. The air was thin and sharp, the aspens just starting to turn. I stepped inside and stopped cold. The old couch was gone, replaced by something generic. Family photos stripped from the walls. Even the smell was different, like someone had opened all the windows to blow out the past. But on a high shelf, tucked behind a stack of paint cans, I found a napkin folded into a maple leaf, my father's Sunday ritual. He used to fold them for me when I was a child, setting them by my plate like a secret code. I held it in my hand, felt its fragile creases. That napkin wasn't just paper. It was a reminder. I wasn't fighting for wood and stone. I was fighting for memory, for a promise made in a different life. Driving back toward town, I noticed a black SUV parked just off the road. No plates on the front. I made a left turn. It followed. I took 2 more turns, slower this time, still there. Then, as I merged onto the interstate, it peeled off at the exit without signaling. My phone buzzed, a blocked call. No voicemail, just silence. My fingers tightened on the wheel. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was a message. Someone wanted me to know they were close. Warnings had always been preludes in my life. This time, I was done ignoring them. I arrived at the Whitlock Charity Gala with my shoulders straight, trying not to let nerves show. The country club was brilliantly lit, the crowd dressed in gowns and suits, Chamber of Commerce types milling about. I remembered helping sketch the event layout years ago. Back then, the lines between family and business blurred. Tonight, I walked past the welcome banner with "Whitlock Family Legacy" printed large and forced myself not to choke. I saw Corvin greeting donors, shaking hands, smiling, basking in that glow of prestige. Whispers trailed me, eyes flicked sideways. I felt the room shift, yet I pushed forward. I would not shrink. When the toast began, Corvin raised his glass. He thanked guests and claimed a new project, in part funded by cabin proceeds. The room murmured. I rose, voice clear. "Excuse me, this cabin was never fully your property. My father's audio and internal memos show otherwise." A stunned silence spread. Corvin's face fixed into a mask. He waved a hand. "This is family drama," he said, loud enough for many to hear. "Misunderstandings, nothing more." But the crowd quieted. I held eyes with several old acquaintances. I laid out discrepancies, his LLC routes, his timing, his silence. I spoke not with accusation, but fact. The clash of truth and facade cut the air. Afterward, the crowd parted. Some walked away. Some stared at me as though seeing me for the first time. I caught Ellery's gaze, her lips tight, confusion or fear. Corvin murmured to his inner circle. One man hissed, "You'll regret this in every boardroom." My jaw clenched. Then I heard a child's voice across the room, soft. "Mom, is she right?" Thaddeus, standing near a support pillar, wide-eyed, caught part of my speech. Twist S16. My daughter overheard. My heart pinched. This was no longer only about me, it was about my name, and his legacy would include her. I retreated to a side lounge, the soft whir of air conditioners muting the din. My phone vibrated. A masked message on screen. "You made yourself public. Now we make you invisible." My chest tightened. A waiter approached with an envelope. He set it gently before me. "Stop digging or lose everything." The handwriting was familiar, cold and final. I remembered Ruth's words. "When they fear you, they'll bury you." Threats had followed power all my life, but now they were blunt arrows. I folded the note and tucked it close. My resolve hardened. They could try to shut me down, but they would not silence me. The gala went live on stream. The camera panned. The host asked me to give remarks. I stepped to the podium, breath steady, heart loud. The mic crackled, then died. Static. No sound. For a moment I froze. Corvin stood beside me, offering his mic with a practiced smile. My hand hovered, trembling. Twist S12. My voice cut off at the moment I needed it most. The room hummed. Eyes turned. The silence screamed louder than any word I could have shouted. I stood at that podium, the mic still dead, the hum of the room thick as fog. People shifted, whispers turning into murmurs, but I wasn't about to let a dead microphone stop me. I drew in a breath and spoke, louder than I thought I could, my voice carrying without help. "You all need to hear this," I said. Faces turned, heads leaned closer. Someone held up their phone, recording. My words spilled out. The memo, the timeline, my father's recording. The silence had been their weapon for years, but tonight I used it. The room, instead of breaking me, began to bend. I saw a woman nod, another whisper, "Good for her." Corvin vanished behind the curtain, scrambling to his allies. I felt the tremor of power shifting under my feet. By the next morning, the clip was everywhere, not nationwide, but enough. Local blogs ran headlines. "Woman denied voice at gala, speaks anyway." My phone blinked nonstop, messages from strangers. I went through the same thing. Inheritance theft is real. Don't give up. It was overwhelming and steadying at once. My lawyer called at noon, voice firmer than usual. "This gives us leverage. The judge will see this." Then an email landed. Subject line, "Clearvine Whistleblower Hotline." Someone anonymous wanted to talk. Vindication burned with a strange fear. The fire I'd lit was out of my hands now. Corvin's counterstrike arrived by afternoon, an envelope from a high-powered law firm, cease and desist. He even called Ruth, trying to shame her. "You know she's damaging the family name," he told her. Ruth didn't bend. She turned and said, "She's protecting what's left of it." Her loyalty moved, quiet but clear. It felt like an old wound stitching closed, my mother finally standing on my side. For the first time, the fight felt less lonely. That evening, the knock on my door was different, firm, official. 2 federal agents showed badges. They'd received a tip about Clearvine, offshore accounts, shell transfers. "We believe you can help," one said. I led them inside. My hands didn't shake when I gave them the flash drive, the memo, the emails. They promised to follow up soon. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was federal. The phone buzzed before I even reached the kitchen. Ellery. Her voice was small but steady. "Mom, I think I found something in Dad's study." I froze, heart skidding in my chest. That room had been empty for years, or so I'd believed. "What did you find, baby?" I asked quietly. On the other end, a pause. "I think you need to see it." I sat beside Ellery on the carpet of her bedroom floor, the folder spread between us. It was labeled CCV Holdings, scrawled in a handwriting I recognized but couldn't quite name. She had found it shoved behind old tax forms in the back of Corvin's study cabinet. Inside were scanned documents, spreadsheets full of codes and wire transfers. Some of them led to shell companies I'd never heard of, in countries I'd never been to. But one paper stopped me cold. A copy of our father's trust amendment, his signature at the bottom, dated just a week before his last stroke. Corvin's initials were scribbled on a cover memo attached to it, referencing a holding shift for consolidation. Ellery leaned in. "He was moving things before Grandpa even passed, wasn't he?" I didn't answer right away. I just reached out and pulled her hand into mine. She had seen through it. All of it. I wiped a tear I didn't expect. We stood up together, and I told her, "We're turning it all in." That same afternoon, I drove to Ruth's. The minute I stepped into her living room, Corvin was already there. He stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, like he'd claimed the house as his battlefield. "You manipulated her," he snapped. "You've turned Mom against her own blood." Ruth, sitting firm and still in her chair, said, She didn't turn me, Corvin. The truth did. I faced him then, calmer than I had ever been with him. You didn't just steal money. You stole his peace, his memory. You erased what was left of his integrity for profit. His jaw clenched, but no defense came. I kept going. I'm not here to hurt you, but I won't protect you anymore either. This ends now. He stared at me for a long second, then walked out without another word. That silence, his final retreat, meant more than any apology could have. I didn't need him to admit it. I had my own closure now. By the following week, the FBI had moved in. They seized financial records, froze 2 of Corvin's accounts, and subpoenaed Clearvine's internal ledgers. A judge ordered a full forensic audit of our father's trust. A new firm was appointed to reallocate the assets fairly. I wasn't promised everything, but I was promised transparency. Finally. One morning, I got a call from a filmmaker doing a piece on elder financial abuse. They'd seen the gala footage. "You're the voice of something bigger," he said. I hesitated, but agreed to meet. That same week, a handwritten card showed up in my mailbox. "Because of your voice, I left. I stopped hiding. Thank you." No name, no return address, but it landed right where I needed it. I wasn't just speaking for me anymore. A few weeks later, I stood on the porch of the cabin, my cabin. The paperwork was signed, the title transferred back. I walked through each room with purpose. Not to erase what had happened here, but to preserve what mattered. I had the fireplace cleaned and restored. Hung the same photo of Dad beside it, him in his flannel, coffee in hand, half smile. I added new touches, fresh curtains, a reading nook for Ellery. She came every other weekend. We cooked together, laughed, even argued sometimes, but we were honest. There were rules now, boundaries. The past still showed up, but it didn't run the place anymore. I sat once with a journal and wrote, "Forgiveness doesn't mean letting it go. It means letting it settle where it belongs." Then I circled the sentence, "You don't get to choose your family, but you do get to choose your story." Now the cabin isn't just mine, it's a space for women starting over. I've opened it as a quiet retreat, word of mouth only, no ads, no banners, just stories, shared over coffee, over firelight. Today, I greet 2 women at the gate, one's carrying a duffel and the other's holding a thick binder. They're strangers, but I see it in their eyes. They've lived through a silence like mine. As I walk them in, I don't feel like a survivor anymore. I feel like a storyteller. And when you reclaim your name, no one gets to rewrite your story.